Five Nights at Freddy's is a multimedia franchise consisting of games, books, toys, shoddy apparel, and, potentially, soon a movie. My Nights at Freddy's is a Minecraft roleplay created by Caveman Films and Ant Venom back in 2015. No one ever talks about the series. I'm going to talk about it. My Nights at Freddy's, or Mnaf, which is how I'll be referring to it from now on because My Nights at Freddy's is a bit of a mouthful. Mnaf is a series consisting of 6 seasons as of this upload, with a possible 7th season releasing after the release of FNAF Security Breach. Boy, that sure dates this video. Mnaf is a series that is very dear to me, mainly because when FNAF first came out, I was really into Minecraft, and FNAF, and Caveman Films, so naturally, I love the series. I would watch every episode when they came out, but only on Caveman's channel, because I was loyal. Up until the 4th season, which I straight up didn't watch, and when it comes to the 5th season, I straight up thought he canceled the series after 1 episode. Thankfully, I was wrong, and I'll elaborate on that later. But I didn't truly get back into the series until the release of Century Saloon about 4 months back. During the long wait between episodes, I decided to binge all the series, except the 1st season. And that led me to having pretty strange opinions in comparison to other fans of the series, as shown in this tier list I made. Which Caveman actually used as a template for his tier list, and I mean, his tier list is wrong, but it's still cool. And if Mr. Man Films is watching this, your opinions are wrong, look at my fan art.
Hey, editor's note, just wanted to say, the audio in this first segment is absolute dog doo-doo. But I don't care about mine, it's Freddy's one, and I'm too lazy to change it, so deal with it. I'm not sorry.
The story starts with Caveman, or Dan, as I'll be calling him from now on, joyously working at the Freddy's establishment. Ant Venom, or Ant, walks in. The two are surprised to see each other, but we soon find that Ant is here about the job offer. We see that Dan is actually the manager of this establishment, though oddly enough he was only hired that very day. Dan gives Ant the rundown and reads a few excerpts from the employee manual, which strangely enough, he's not allowed to give out to other employees. And while that's odd enough, the excerpts start to dabble into slightly unsettling. The excerpts tell them in the case of any strange intruders to lock the doors and stay safe inside, which then leads into the strangeness of how well defended the office is. Before we're able to ponder too much on these oddities, Dan makes his leave, leaving Ant alone to secure the establishment overnight. I know I probably didn't use that word correctly, but I don't give a f***. Night 1. Dan doesn't actually leave Ant completely alone, however, because they would actually call throughout the entire night. This boils down to Ant describing his actions and the moving fuzzy friends to Dan, as Dan questions the validity of these claims. Though questioning actually leads to Night 2. Night 2 has the 2 switch, with Dan taking over security duties to prove Ant is crazy about the animatronics moving, and Ant simply on the phone for moral support and to say, "I told you so." Night 2 is very similar to Night 1, but Dan ends leaving the office to search for Ronaldo. Oh, who's Ronaldo? Well, Ronaldo is. Dan ends up having a close encounter with Foxy, trapping him in the closet briefly. As the night ends, Dan is still skeptical, but more flabbergasted at the animatronics moving, when, really, they shouldn't be able to. I mean, come on, Dan, isn't it obvious? Ant is obviously the one wearing the suit. Can't you see his name tag? Come into work to find an excited Dan. He seems excited to show Ant his plan. The plan in question is to wear Freddy's suit and head in order to catch Ronaldo when he tries to move the animatronics. Okay, maybe I should explain who and what a Ronaldo is. Ronaldo is the name this series gave to William Afton, or the purple guy. He was also fired on Night 2. It would later be retconned that Ronaldo is simply an alias that William goes by. Now, if you're wondering why William goes from an Enderman to this Vince anime-looking boy over here, well, you see, Dan stands up on the stage in order to wait for Ronaldo. The lights go out and Dan patiently waits. Though as Ant soon alerts him, Bonnie and Chica have left the stage, not only somehow not alerting him, but with also no sign of Ronaldo. Ant continues to monitor the place as Dan walks around in his fursuit trying not to raise suspicion, though they soon find him out upon discovering a headless Freddy in the backstage. Dan ends up in the kitchen and Bonnie somehow got in even though Dan was held up in the only entrance. The same goes for Ant, who got attacked from behind in the office. These cases make no sense because the attackers didn't come from the only entrances to the room. Or so we think. Night 4. Night 4 begins with us finding both Dan and Ant have been demoted. Dan to security guard and Ant to second security guard, who is supposedly supposed to die for the main security guard. Dan is very noticeably peeved about his demotion. We also discovered the vents for the first time, which were alluded to previously by the animatronics getting into spots that made no sense, such as the previously mentioned moments of Dan and Ant getting attacked from seemingly impossible angles. They explore the vents and are able to find a secret room. Ant accidentally locks them both inside. They find a bunch of old animatronics in the room, including Golden Freddy, or Fredbear. They end up breaking through the wall, which reveals that this room is located right behind the front desk. Other than that, this night is pretty standard. The animatronics are more aggressive than before, etc., etc. The night ends with Dan going to sleep on the stage while Ant takes over the day shift for the day, so that Dan can get some rest. Overall, this night is pretty alright. Night 5. Night 5 starts with Dan waking up and finding that Ant has not only put and locked all the animatronics away in the secret room, but that he's also set up cameras within the coal black vents. Seriously, I've been holding on to this for like 6 years. Why the heck are the vents made of freaking coal blocks? Why? Anyway, on more important matters, they find a phone call that states the following.
Yeah.
Greetings.
Okay.
This is a pre-recorded message.
What the?
Hello, security guards, and welcome to your final night on the job. Here
What
at
is a
Freddy
final
Fazbear's Pizzeria branch
Yeah, dude.
1987, you might have noticed some eccentricities in our animatronics.
You think?
That is actually normal. We have been actively collecting data samples of our security guards and how they are able to handle the animatronics.
That's
You
rude.
two have been selected for a higher
Okay.
paying position at our manufacturing facility.
Ooh.
All you have left to do is finish this night. We would also like to inform you that you have never been in true danger. The models you have been interacting with have all
Really?
been equipped with AI that
Really?
recognizes
I know,
and
right?
prevents damage to humans. The behavior of the animatronics might have seemed aggressive or threatening at some point during the week.
Yeah.
But again, we would like to ensure you that your lives were not in danger. The newer models were never designed with parts that would be able to maim or render human flesh.
Oh,
Well,
really? Okay.
wow.
However, it has
Oh.
come to our attention that a recently
what's going
sealed
on?
room has been
Okay.
compromised. The models in that room are from much earlier in Fazbear's history. Our present safety models do not apply to those animatronics. It is advised to not engage with the older animatronics.
And
If you do see any suspicious movements from the animatronics, there is a kill switch located at the...
Kill switch. Ooh. Wait. No. Come on.
With the most helpful information in the series, yes really, being conveniently cut off right before the juicy deets are spilled, they are forced to survive the night without the ability to shut off the animatronics. But hey, it's fine. I mean, Ant locked the animatronics away anyways, right? Right? The door opens, allowing the animatronics to escape. Soon Ronaldo even makes an appearance, showing up on a few cameras, seemingly taunting them. I mean, hey, if I was 9 feet tall and evil, I'd taunt these two numbnuts as well. A dark-colored bear, which they found in the secret room, begins to not only break into another secret room that's located in front of the office, but also, from there, he begins to break into the office. Thankfully, he isn't able to make it through the walls before the end of the night. They find that within the new secret room, there are 5 dead child skulls, as opposed to live child skulls. Frickin' hell. Conclusion. Going into Mnaf Season 1, I had, well, let's say, not very high hopes, but upon rewatching the series, I found myself enjoying my time with it. The season is definitely charming in its, let's say, crappiness. I mean, heck, for the first 2 nights, the only people working on the series were Cave and Ant. And they even try to explain why you can see Caveman and Ant Venom's username above the animatronic heads, by pawning it off as Ronaldo, stealing the name tag and putting it on the animatronic, which is dumb and stupid. And why would you write that? That's really dumb. Why would you say that? But if you remember, the two were in fact offered a higher paying position at the Freddy's manufacturer. I wonder what that might entail. Mnaf 2 is where the series gets original, because last time I checked, there isn't a FNAF game that takes place in a factory. It's also where more plot happens. Speaking of which, plot summary. Night 1. We see our 2 heroes sitting by a phone. Ant calls Dan and tells him that he's going to take the job they were both offered at the end of the last season. After some consideration, Dan decides to take the job as well. They both meet up at the factory, and as they head inside, they meet a quirky manager foreman guy. You can tell they really wanted you to like this guy, and it mostly works. Some of his jokes are a tad unfunny, but that just might be my sense of humor. They also find that the specific animatronic at the factory is manufacturing are toy animatronics. They all see the new animatronic, Vinny, or Toy Vinny to be more specific. I like Vinny. He was an original animatronic created for this series, and his design is pretty neat. Though I will admit I am iffy on his red eyes, it seems a bit overkill. That goes for his wife too, but we'll get to her later. They see the research and development room, which they find out they're not allowed to enter unless there's an alarm. They also find out that they're both going to be in different offices that are at different sides of the factory, with Dan in the red office on one side and Ant in the blue office on the other side. They also find out that they're going to be living at the factory, which surprises them at first, naturally, but they quickly calm down. They see that they'll be living in an over-glorified studio apartment. Shout out to this series for being the only reason I actually know what a studio apartment is. They head to bed so they'll be wide awake for the night shift. During the night shift, they find that some of their cameras actually monitor the opposite side, specifically the vent cams. The animatronics walk around a bit but act more playful than aggressive, or playfully aggressive as they put it. The night ends with no real issues. Night 2. Night 2 starts with the two being awoken by an alarm. They go downstairs and find that a worker has been murdered. Also, the worker is named Billy, which is, yeah. The two split up to look for clues before the police come. Dan finds a book which seems to get cut off right before any important info is told. This series is a fan of that, I suppose. Ant ends up finding a bloody Foxy and a bloody human ear. They then have my favorite interaction in the series. Heck, I've made an animatic out of it. The animatic's bad, but I like the scene, so it's fine. They check the cameras and find out that Billy was murdered by Toy Foxy after Ronaldo tampered with it. The two are naturally very alarmed by the revelation that Ronaldo's there. Despite Ronaldo's sudden appearance, the two complete the night without too much hassle, though Ant does end up losing power and having to go out and turn it back on. Overall, this night is pretty standard. Night 3. Night 3 has them open up the R&D room when they end up finding Vixie, aka Vinny's wife. Her design is, a bit much if I'm honest. The red and sharp teeth are iffy in my opinion. Anyway, they see that she's in there and they head upstairs. Later, they end up getting yelled at by a guy who's replaced the foreman, who hasn't been seen in a while. He calls them idiots for opening the R&D room, and fair, and also that Vinny is an extremely dangerous prototype. They are told to keep Vinny away from Vixie. Despite that, the night goes without too much incident, though Ant almost gets attacked and Dan does get attacked. They end up finding Vinny standing outside of the R&D room, which is alarming to say the least. Despite that, I'm gonna be saying that a lot, they end up going to bed. Even though it's probably not the smartest thing to do. Night 4 starts with them cleaning the place up a bit. They end up going outside in the rain to throw out the trash, and after some bickering and a bit of dumpster diving, Ant ends up smelling something. They end up finding the corpse of the old foreman behind the dumpster. They also end up finding a blood trail leading all the way up to a vent which leads directly to the R&D room. They rush over to the R&D room only to find that not only is it open, but that Vixie is also gone, leaving only a puddle of blood where she once stood. They suddenly are pulled away by an alarm. They rush over to find that Vixie is in the vents. They see that somehow Vixie is in both of their vents at the same time. They try to leave only to find that not only has every worker been murdered, but also they've been trapped inside by a stack of crates. They rush to find safety, but find animatronics at every turn. They find Ronaldo in their living quarters. They try to confront him, but are forced to flee. They find momentary safety in Ant's office, though this safety is short-lived as Vixie pops in from the vents. They rush over to Dan's office. The night boils down to them running around and trying to survive, while they try their best to stay within the safety of their offices, though they're usually unsuccessful. The night ends with them hiding in the R&D room with Bonnie, Vinny, and Vixie nearly finding them before the morning. Night 5. Night 5 is them begin by assembling disguises from unfinished animatronics, with Dan as Bonnie and Ant as Freddy. To their surprise, they find the animatronic moving during the day. Ant tries to check the time on his phone, but Ronaldo's tampered with it. They end up sneaking around the facility whilst using their disguises. For example, they hide in the bathroom, and whilst disguised, they yell at Chica and Vixie to get them to leave the men's room, and somehow it works. In the end, they both get to their respective offices, but are taken by what seems like dozens of Ronaldos. The series ends with them being taken by Ronaldo to who knows where. Conclusion. Mine Freddy's Factory is a big improvement over the first series. While I'm admittedly indifferent to the original, I can say with mild confidence that I very like this one. Yes, good. And while I do enjoy the series, I don't have much to say. It's just good. I do find it very funny how Vinny and Vixie are the wrong type of cow, with Vinny being a cow, the female breed, and Vixie being a bull, which is the male breed. It was simply a mistake by the designers, but I still find it very funny. There's also the security skirt, which I didn't mention. The skirt being a genuine mistake that they had no choice but to keep in since the rest of the recording was so good. The skirt becoming pretty iconic. Anyway, series good. Monty Freddy's Fun Park is where a lot of people start to get iffy on the quality of the series. Though I am not one of those people. It's also probably the most confusing plot-wise. No, it really isn't that confusing. It's just a tad strange in its concept and logic. But hey, how confusing can that plot be, I don't hear you say? Well, let's find out. Episode 0. Mnaf 3 actually doesn't start with the night 1. It actually starts with a prequel episode dubbed Episode 0. Episode 0 goes all the way back to August 1987, back to when Dan and Ant were kids. It's Dan's birthday, and he's invited all of his nameless friends, and Ant. The birthday party taking place at Fredbear's Family Diner of all places. The suited up performers dressed up in Fredbear and Spring Bonnie outfits bring Dan his way too big birthday cake. After young Dan misunderstands birthday tradition, they perambulate a bit. Dan ends up having to visit the urination station. He leaves Ant to go ask for directions. Once he gets the party's location from the man inside the Fredbear suit, he heads down the hall. As he's on his way, he notices the Purple Man, now sporting his Vincent Anime Boy design, slicing and dicing up a kid named Billy. Because of course. The Purple Man walks away, giving Dan a chance to check on Billy, though he gets no response. Despite the blatant corpse, the twerp decides to go to the bathroom once the Purple Man returns. After Dan is finished with his business, he heads down the hall again to see Billy now stuffed inside a Bonnie suit. As he barely escapes the kitchen before the Purple Man returns, he quickly rushes over to Ant and by proxy the suited performers. He brings them over to the kitchen, flopping up his words as much as you'd expect from a child who just witnessed a murder. He brings them over only to see that Billy is missing, the only trace of Billy being his blood spread across the counter, which everyone except Dan assures it's tomato juice. The adults leave, but Dan and Ant decide to try and look for Billy. They see the back door open and head through, only to find the Purple Man shutting the door on a truck. They flee back to the safety of the kitchen, only to have the Purple Man chase them. Thankfully, they escape to the party room and they quickly rush to their parents, begging to be taken home. Night 1. Night 1 starts with Dan and Ant stuck in cages. A voice tells them to escape because he is coming. The voice unlocks their gates, and when they try to leave, they are intercepted by Ronaldo. Also, the voice is never mentioned or explained. We then are introduced to the Fazbear Fun Park. The Fun Park is a giant amusement park owned by the Fredbear brand and headed by Dan and Ant. Now, you might be going, wait, Aspestose, why are we in a knockoff Disneyland? Weren't we just in a room with TVs along all the walls, and the two were in cages? How are they owning a fun park? And I might say, first of all, don't interrupt me like that, and second, yes, this is quite a sudden shift in tone and location. We see that the two, along with a new fellow named William, are inspecting the park in order to see that it's ready for opening the following day. They inspect around, ride a roller coaster, argue about prices, etc, etc. Ant even jumps around in a bouncy castle. Now, what's really interesting is the changes in Dan and Ant's characters. One, Dan is a money-grubbing, impertinent boss, and Ant is a combative, assertive co-owner. They also seem quite bitter towards each other, with Dan threatening to dock Ant's pay, and Ant retorting that he literally can't. Though, on a more important matter, they seem to have conflicting memories, with Ant remembering being at Dan's birthday party back at Fredbear's, and Dan asserting that they only met back in college, and Dan's constant flubbing with saying the name Fazbear instead of Fredbear. As they reach the end of their inspection, they see that neither of the security guards have checked in. They're naturally furious about this and tell William to head home to call them. With no guards, Dan and Ant are forced to don the roles of security guards. Oh, and there's also Dan and Ant animatronics. Night 2. Night 2 has them dress up in their outfits once again. Well, it's for the first time according to Dan, though Ant seems to remember doing the role of night guard before. They receive a call from Mr. Afton, who explains to them the game mechanics. He explains that the way the animatronics work is that they're receiving a patch for their software before opening day, and that, until the software is finished installing, they have a little bug. They will occasionally attempt to reposition themselves, though when they end up leaving their designated area, they, well...
Why would you even make it so that when they leave their area, they kind of just start attacking people? That seems like a pretty big security oversight, Mr. Afton. Sorry.
Yeah, I couldn't put it better myself. They are given gates in order to combat this. The two are also able to monitor the same cameras this time. The night ends up being Dan leaving his guard towers or herd the animatronic back to their spots as Ant tells him who's moving away from where they should be. Near the end, Ant ends up spotting something on the camera. He sees something wrong with Freddy's head.
he urgently tells Dan to head over there. Though, when Dan heads over there, he sees...
Run, Neo, run. What is he doing?
He's beginning to believe.
Night 3. Night 3 starts with a dream, showing a man in his garage working on... Wait, is that baby? Well, Afmal walks in. Wait, no, not Afmal, just a child. False alarm. We don't talk about Afmal here. The man tells the girl to leave as he's busy. Impertinent little brat. She heads back outside to play as we hear a car screeching and eventually crashing into something. The man in the garage rushes outside only to find that his daughter was run over, leaving only her Fredbear doll surrounded by this horrific accident. What an upbeat and fun way to start night 3! Dan is woken up by a word ant. The opening scene is revealed to have been a dream Dan was having whilst he was knocked out by Freddy's The One shtick. After his passing out, Dan not only begins to act more like his past self, but he also begins to remember the factory. Ant tells him a bit more about the factory, specifically how Vixie was the worst. They head back to their towers and continue on guarding the place. Dan and Ant start to return to their dynamic that was established back in the first 2 seasons. Dan makes a Yarhar joke. Is cute. They find out how useless the gates are as the animatronics are able to simply jump over them. Also, Dan is confused by the puppets moving, mainly because there are literally no mechanisms within it. Ant begins to search and walk around. He ends up finding a blood trail in the replica/original Fredbear's family diner. It's not made super clear. He tells Dan to head over there, though as he heads over there, he sees the puppet/marionette. It's not made super clear, floating around in front of his tower. Dan successfully meets up with Ant and they follow the blood trail. Dan also begins to get a headache. The blood trail leads to a familiar place, the kitchen, where they find the 2 night guards cut up and very much not alive. They're obviously very freaking panicked about this. Night 4. Night 4 starts with Ant leaving Dan by the bodies in order to call the cops. When he tries to call them, the phone goes out. A gray figure ends up coming up from behind, with the head of an animatronic version of Dant. Dant? Oh no, that's the ship name. A gray figure ends up coming up from behind with the head of the animatronic version of Ant. However, when he awakes, he has the animatronic head. He goes back to Dan, who doesn't notice the difference in Ant's appearance. Ant tells him that the phone's out, though Ant does say he has a plan. He tells Dan about the emergency satellite phone, and you might say, hey, that's good, but then Ant says where the phone is located, and it's located in the haunted house, which they rightfully call out as dumb. As they leave, they find out that someone else is closing the gates. They return to their respective gates only to find the same gray purple guy FNAF 2 Easter egg totally 100% real figure crawling through the vents over to Dan's tower. The figure ends up chasing Dan, though he loses him in the elevator. Ant ends up staying in his tower in order to see who's messing with the gates, while Dan attempts to head to the haunted house. Dan ends up getting chased by Foxy, and when he urgently needs Ant to open the gate, Ant's radio cuts out. Dan is forced to flee from Foxy. He rushes over to Ant's tower only to find that Ant is not there, but the puppet is simply floating motionless inside of Ant's office. Dan ends up rushing out of there. Chica does this, and he ends up getting chased into a long underground tunnel, whilst being pursued by literally every animatronic. The chase is very entertaining, and also, Bonnie is a total bro, but only sometimes. Dan ends up meeting back up with the robot-faced Ant at the end of the tunnel. Dan informs Ant of the puppet being in his office, which confuses him. They have a chat about gun safety and then they head over to the haunted house. Ant tells Dan to go in first, but when he heads in, Ant's face distorts and gains sharp teeth and red eyes. He locks Dan in the house as he laughs. Night 5. Night 5 starts with Ant flatlining and Ronaldo throwing him in lava. Wait, what? Yeah, so Ant's freaking dead. He was killed off because his actor, IRL Ant Venom, didn't want to work on the series. 1, because of how finicky it was, and 2, because he was taking his channel in a new direction. This new direction ended up really working out for him, since he's doing really well, judging by all those MC Pro hosting sponsors. Anyway, he makes really cool stuff. Go watch Ant Venom. Anyway, we pick up with Dan still trapped within the haunted house. He ends up breaking through some glass. He wanders through some trees before re-emerging on the path.
where he is then promptly spotted by Ant and the other animatronics. He wins away from them, weaving in and out of buildings and alleys in an attempt to lose them. He also ends up placing his flashlight, which is a torch, on the ground and trying to play it off. He ends up getting a sizable lead on them, and he smartly uses this lead to make a break for the exit. He manages to escape the fun park, where he finds out that the animatronics are luckily unable to leave the park. He bids farewell to the park. Night 6. Night 6 picks up with Dan running down the sidewalk in an attempt to find any semblance of human life, though he only comes upon a house, and after some frantic banging of the door, he finds that not only is the door open, but also that no one is home. The closest thing to a person he finds are some bloodstains on the floor. Oh, sorry, strawberry jam. Also, the house he finds is actually the FNAF 4 house, which is neat. He searches for a phone to actually call the cops this time, but only finds a TV hooked up to some glass, because that makes sense. He notices the garage, and as he's headed over there, he hears a voice from behind. The voice belonging to Michael, who looks like the gray guy, who looks like the FNAF 2 purple guy animatronic Easter egg, who looks like trash. Michael's full name is Michael Afton. That's right, Michael is William's real son, not his fake son, who he called William. Because I don't know, he's a narcissist or something? He informs Dan that the world he's in isn't real, though the danger he's in is very much so, and that if he isn't careful, he could very much become like Ant, who is very much dead. He tells Dan how when his sister died, his father never really recovered, that he became obsessed with his work. He tells Dan that his father called him claiming he'd saved his daughter, though she was in trouble. Michael also states that he probably died soon after that. Pour one out for Michael, he deserved better. Michael also informs Dan that he has all the pieces to figure everything out, and that he just has to put them back together. He tells Dan to head back to the park before leaving him. Dan decides to trust him and head back. When he returns to the park, he finds William, aka William's fake son who he named after himself. He finds out that Junior over here came after receiving a call from Anthony D. Venom. The D stands for dead. He reveals that he was actually able to call the cops, which is absolute hogwash since has been established. The phone no work. Dan points out how he's really only seen 3 people, the 3 people being Ant, William, and himself. He also points out how easy a corpse would be to fake. Dan also reveals that he's spoken with Michael. William/Ronaldo/William reveals himself, stating that it was about time he figured everything out.
Night 7.
Night 7 starts with Dan's confrontation with William, who is just actually the fake bad looking purple guy, totally 100% real hoax fake purple guy animatronic. And I just can't think of a good way to summarize this scene, so I'm just gonna let it play.
So it really is true. All of this has been fake.
No, I assure you, this has all been very real.
Why are you doing this? Why a fun park? Why me? And why did you kill Ant?
His soul is not clean.
Wait, his soul?
His soul was the pure vessel for my dear Amelia, but it's obvious now that it's your soul she seeks.
You're crazy!
But the part who would want to see her proud once again. Who is the day that goes by that I don't see her? I feel the torment. A truer torment than you or anyone else will ever imagine.
You killed my friend! You don't think I know how it feels?
Silence! You know nothing of what I felt. Capture him!
I'm not going to let you get away with this, Ronaldo, or William Afton, or whatever else.
As you saw in the clip I've lazily inserted in, Ant was killed because his soul was impure, while Dan's soul is pure. His soul being the one that Amelia is really clamming for, apparently. After that, Dan flees from Billy and the animatronics. He escaped into the bouncy castle in order to regain his thoughts. Michael appears to him once again, to tell Dan to find the room with the cages and the TVs from the beginning of the series. He tells Dan that he must find the thing that doesn't belong in order to escape, whatever that means. He also asks Dan that once he escapes, that he prevents his father from doing this ever again. He naturally agrees. Dan manages to find the doors to the room, but finds out that it's locked. Not only that, but it's an electric door, so he'll have to turn off the generator in order to get it open. He once again journeys through the underground tunnel. It's still great. Freddy even jumps out with some cobblestone bricks in his hand by accident. He's able to reach the generator. He manages to get the animatronics to back off by threatening to turn off the generator. He turns off the generator but sees he's trapped. He has a brief confrontation with William before fleeing. He has a peaceful stroll in the pitch darkness, though animatronics start to gain up on him. Rushes to the room, but as he enters, William appears in the doorway, intending to stop Dan from escaping, though Michael has other plans and intervenes, allowing Dan to escape, thus ending My Nights at Freddy's Fun Park. Conclusion. Mnaf 3 Fun Park is a blast to watch. It's really entertaining. It's not flawless, however. Far from it. The map is way too big and a tad underutilized. Anne's death isn't given enough impact, and the whole Dan seeing William murder a kid as a child thing isn't really necessary and adds nothing to the overall plot. It's like that one episode of Community where they reveal all the characters were destined to meet and all their lives are intertwined at one point. It's really unnecessary. What this series also does a lot well, other than the stuff I mentioned, the plot is really engaging and the initial mystery of everything not making sense is really gripping. And while it's a shame that Ant decided to leave the series, his death did lead to something really cool, with all of his episodes after having his head replaced being all corrupted and glitchy. And when the puppet was in his office, we can see that from his perspective, he couldn't see her. It's real neat. Also, I think it's really funny how Dan constantly refers to everyone as Billy, even though it's established that that's not their name. But the series ends with one of those to be continued things. Man, I wonder how the story will develop in. Wait, that's it? Yeah, seeing as how I have a passing interest in my mental health, I'm gonna cut it off here. This is a huge project for me, and I really just want to work on some other stuff. Expect part 2 covering the other 3 seasons sometime in the near future. And I hope you'll watch my other videos coming out. And if you like this, I guess like, comment, and subscribe or whatever. Bye, I love you. Bye. Love you. Mwah.